Back-to-school savings are officially in session at Tanger Outlets. Shop tax-free August 2nd through 6th and save up to 70% off the latest school styles. The best of apparel, footwear, accessories, and more. Save at Nike Factory Store, American Eagle, Gap Outlet, Crocs, Under Armour, Banana Republic Factory, and hundreds more. There's always something happening. Discover the latest fun and events all season long. Tanger Outlets, your savings destination.
And then I said, I've got this idea about this bomb on a bus.
Get ready for Rush Hour. It's a movie oral history like no other. 50 miles per hour charts the making and legacy of director Jan de Bont's 1994 summer blockbuster, Speed.
You're talking about a film that dramatically overachieved.
The premise was so ridiculous and yet so delightful.
I think I was totally ready for it. I mean, I've worked on some really big action movies already.
I'm your host, Kris Tapley, and across 50 episodes, I'm going to take you on a breakneck journey from conception to execution, distribution, and beyond.
The first thing I came up with was the little bit, the bum, 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 bum.
It was like abort, abort, abort. She was 15 feet from being toast.
Join me as I talk to the people who made it happen and discuss their memories of an electrifying thrill ride that defied expectations and became a global star-making phenomenon.
But, I didn't have the real estate, to face off with Jan and go, well, my character wouldn't do that.
I did not like my character. I was glad she died.
He gave him specific instructions, and he just kind of went off and did what he did, and he was paid a fuckload of money.
The career was floundering, and I just told the agent, I need something.
People said, well, what did you do in the film? And I said, basically what I did in the film was Jack!
Through conversations with filmmakers, film scholars, and film fans, I'll attempt to secure Speed's rightful place in the canon of action cinema.
And then all of a sudden it's like she's a movie star. She's like a fully formed movie star.
Speed is just so much fun to watch. It's so economical.
Speed is, with Die Hard, the sea change.
Every moment of it feels real.
It feels like that came from a more innocent time.
All of that and more, 50 weeks, 50 episodes on 50 miles per hour.
Welcome to Die Hard on a Black, the podcast where we explore the influence of Die Hard on action cinema, one action movie at a time. I'm Philip Gawthorne, and with me as always is Liam Billingham, and today's film is Speed.
It's Die Hard on a bus. It's also the greatest movie ever made, maybe. Phil, how are you?
I'm good. I haven't been this hyped about a movie that we're doing on the show since
the
Hard
last
Boiled.
Movie we talked about.
I mean, I'm hyped for pretty much every movie, but this is next level.
Next level, and it's very special because every once in a while a movie podcast comes out that gets us very, 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 very excited, and that happened recently, and we had to have the host of that podcast, 50 miles per hour, Kris Tapley, on the show. Welcome to the show, Kris.
Dudes, thank you so much.
Oh my God, this is like the best. We're so happy you're here.
Those compliments are like mana right now because I'm deep in editing and just drowning every day, and love to get a pat on the back.
Very quick story. So Kris hosts 50 miles per hour podcast, which is a 50 episode oral history of the movie Speed. And I have never subscribed to a feed faster than when Blake Howard, our mutual friend, shared that. And I think he said something like, I've heard the first 3 episodes of this and it's great. And I was like, sold. Like, let me throw $50 at this right now, which you should do, $50 to get episodes early. I love, I'll throw that idea out there.
Keep it on brand.
And the fact that it was so, it's delivered in every single way.
Thank you.
And we love it. And we talk about it. We literally once a week, Phil will text me and be like, did you listen to 50 miles per hour?
It was an instant addiction for me. It's a brilliant concept and incredible, especially if you're interested in the sort of inside baseball of movie making and getting really granular and specific about everything from script development to the psychology behind casting. And then now you're going to be moving into more production stuff. It is riveting. And I absolutely love the show. And really, we are thrilled to have who I have to say is the world's foremost expert on the movie Speed, and we got him on the show. So welcome, Kris. Welcome.
Thank you. No, it's nice to use my credentials for something that I can actually do something with them.
Speaking of your credentials, Kris Tapley has covered the film and television industry for 2 decades with bylines at Variety, Vanity Fair, The New York Times, Netflix Q, HitFix, and The Times of London. He was formerly the host of Variety and iHeartRadio's Playback podcast, where he interviewed filmmakers, actors, and more about their work. He also hosted Netflix's behind-the-scene podcast, The Call Sheet, as well as the popular awards season podcast, Oscar Talk, a co-production with IndieWire. He now works as a writer and consultant in Los Angeles, where he lives with his loving wife, lively son, and lazy cat. Great alliteration. You can follow him on Twitter at Kris Tapley, and you can follow 50 Miles Per Hour Pod at 50 MPH POD. We're glad to have you. Thanks for coming on.
That is all accurate information.
Yeah, I'm glad. That's cool. I found it on your website, so I hope so.
So my question for you, which I'm sure the listeners would want to know, as you already alluded to, like the amount of work that you're undertaking with this podcast, I mean, it truly is a labor of love, right? 50 episodes about one movie, but it all holds up. It's all incredibly compelling and enlightening and illuminating. What was it about Speed specifically that compelled you to go on this mammoth undertaking?
Yeah, Speed is the movie that got me interested in the filmmaking process. It was the first movie where I was like, oh, that's how they did that. They had 10, 11, 12 buses or whatever. And, I saw the HBO First Look, if you remember that show a long time ago, that really was just a collection of EPK footage from movies. But you don't know that when you're a kid and you're just watching it like, that's how they did that. And... I went to film school. I came out here and was a journalist for 15 years covering film. And so it was the movie that just kind of pulled the veil back for me a little bit. And so fast forward, I did a 20th anniversary story about the movie in 2014 and talked to all the passengers, the actors on the bus for an oral history, and as well as Keanu, Sandra, and Jan de Bont. And I just always had it in the back of my head that I might do more one day. And so here we are. I've talked to like 90 people, and labor of love is it. It's not a labor of income.
Welcome to podcasting.
Yeah. But it's a blast, and honestly, I can't think of a better movie that's a better specimen for just really examining every step of the process. Yeah. Screenplay development, casting, how a movie shifts before it even goes before cameras. Certainly the filmmaking process, and just every step of the way. It's just a great specimen for that.
It's interesting because when we talked about The Fugitive, I called it a perfect organism. And I think that Speed is also, this is one of the few movies we've done on the show that is a perfect action movie. Mm-hmm. So I think a study of perfection is an endeavor worth undertaking, and that's why I think it truly is worthy of the level of like microcosmic analysis that you do on your show. So pivoting, this show isn't about Speed. This episode is about Speed.
Are you sure?
This show is
it
about.
can be.
Yeah, it can be. It is today.
It's starting to like.
I don't talk about Speed enough.
The power of the bus is so strong. But what is your relationship with Die Hard? As this show is obviously about Die Hard and the relationship of other movies and other movies that have it has influenced. What's your relationship with that one?
That's fun actually, because when I think about it, Die Hard's probably one of my earliest sort of indelible movie memories. Bruce Willis jumping off that building and it exploding behind him is like maybe the first iconic movie image I probably recall. I would have been 8 years old when I saw the movie, but when I do think about those indelible images, I think about Gene Kelly in The Lamppost or Cary Grant in the crop duster, and John McClane jumping off that building with, what is that called? Fire hose tied around his waist. Yeah. I mean, it was such a wild, I'm sure I saw it on tape or something with my parents, seems to be what I recall, and it was just a badass movie. I can curse on this, right?
Yeah, of course.
Okay.
Help yourself.
Yeah. Fuck yeah. so yeah.
It's all we do on most episodes, so feel free.
It stuck with me. I mean, so yeah, I would say my parents, just watching it with my parents.
Yeah.
And just, it as you know, it changed a lot of things for movies. It was the beginning of maybe, in some ways, modern movie
Absolutely.
making.
We've talked many times on the show how there's basically movies before Die Hard and there's movies after Die Hard, and how you can draw a line pretty easily between what preceded and what followed Die Hard. This film in particular, which we'll get to. But do you have a favorite Die Hard character?
Ooh, kind of a curveball.
Well, I mean, it's got to be Hans, Bubby. I'm your white knight.
Yes.
I mean, it's got to be Ellis.
And it's interesting how the Gruber thing has come up a lot on your show. I think Graham Yost, the writer of Speed, referenced how much he loved Hans Gruber, and that informed some of the creation of the villain, which was quite a tortured path, as you kind of talk about. Yeah. So we're going to get into that in a moment, into some of the more specific Die Hard DNA. But before we do, should we just put this in context with a quick top line fact check?
A couple facts about Speed. Give us the facts.
Yeah.
Chris probably has these facts, so it might be nice for him to
God
hear.
forbid I get them wrong.
Yeah, we should have a little, like a ding, 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 like a little buzzer.
I'm definitely like,
I should have like grabbed one from my kids at like Game Set or something like that.
Hopefully these are accurate. So Speed had its wide release on June 10th, 1994, which was approximately 8 months after our last film, Demolition Man, which was released on October 8th of 1993. We're now 6 years after the release of Die Hard, which was, of course, the summer of '88, still feeling its aftershocks, as we will continue to do for many decades. It was an original screenplay written by Graham Yost, directed by Jan de Bont, produced by Mark Gordon. Of course, it stars Keanu Reeves, Dennis Hopper, Sandra Bullock, Jeff Daniels, and Joe Morton. On an estimated budget of $35 million, it grossed $350.4 million. Now, of course, those figures are not always absolutely accurate. So
Fact check.
Yes.
I'll tell you, the thing about the box office is it's hard to track down those international numbers for movies. This isn't an old movie, but it's just I think like I'll call it the collapse of box office mojo has made like it difficult to track down certain numbers, but that all seems about right. It was officially budgeted at $28 million.
Okay.
But they added more as they went.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you for clarifying that. But the point really is that, I mean, if this made $100 million, it would be considered a major success. But to make $350.4 million on that budget for a film that, as you talked about, Fox wasn't necessarily like considered a big blockbuster movie, was kind of like they considered it almost a borderline B-level genre movie at first, and then when they is that right?
I wouldn't even say borderline.
Yeah,
I mean they didn't have faith in it beyond what they used to call a programmer. Just a movie that could be made for a number, and they wanted to make it for 15.
Wow.
They wanted to hire, guys, someone like Dwight Little, the director of Rapid Fire. They were looking at guys like that, and they kind of rolled the dice with Jan, but they didn't want to put a lot into it. Keanu made $1 million, and as I hear it, Sandra made $400,000. So. They weren't going to get like Julia Roberts and Tom Hanks on a bus, they weren't trying to do that kind of a movie. But also
I'm
like
trying to picture that version of the movie in my head.
Much different.
Yeah.
But that's also how you make money, is you do things for a responsible price, and then everybody gets rich.
Yeah.
So there you go.
And some people definitely must have gotten rich here.
It's fascinating to think of it as the little bus that could. This sort of smaller movie that was not necessarily like it was going to attract tremendous studio resources, which was just regarded as a little action picture that maybe they could turn a profit on if they cast it right and they got the formula right, and it's ended up being an iconic classic that 30 years later a seasoned film journalist is dedicating all of his life to cataloging. So that just tells you the power of this movie.
Can I ask quickly, did you guys, do you remember when this came out? Because, this is the summer of Speed for me. I saw it at least twice. I just feel like it, occupied my brain for months.
Well, 94 was actually a notable year for me. Before that, I was, 1 year in the theater, one movie in the theater every year.
Yeah.
It was like, what's the one movie we're going to see? Batman, Batman Returns.
Good choices,
yeah,
honestly.
You know, Masters of the Universe was my first movie in the, in the theater.
I saw that at the theater too.
I
remember
we're
it
all
fondly.
The same age. I cried after. I was so scared.
I thought it was
of
magical.
I,
I love it.
terrified.
I love that movie.
My dad was like, "What'd you think?" I was like, "It was so scary."
The Cosmic Key. Let's do it.
But 94 was the first year I saw like movie upon movie upon movie. Part of that was I was like coming off of being a real big In Living Color fan.
Yeah.
So Jim Carrey was blowing up.
Right.
Again
Right.
So I went to see like The Mask and Dumb and Dumber and everything. And that summer was, I mean, I'm going to do an episode down the pike where it's just the movies of 94 because it's worth doing. I mean, there's so many great movies from prestige to popular entertainment, just so much good stuff. So yeah.
It's like a big coming of age.
Yeah, I remember that year, and we had Nick Dissemblian on last week, who's the editor of Empire, and my first copy of Empire was the preview of summer of 94, and it was True Lies, Blown Away, Speed, a lot of these great action movies that we'll be doing. True Lies kind of eclipsed, I think, was the focus of the studio's attention over Speed, right?
That's the reason that Speed released in June, because True Lies needed more time. True Lies had that release date, and they needed more time, and they were going to release Speed in August, and then they were test screening it, and like, this movie's playing like gangbusters. Okay, we're going to move it to June. And it sort of launched the season that year.
Yeah.
I mean, a week later, Lion King came out. And then before long, Forrest Gump. I mean, it was like...
Yeah, that was a real golden age.
It's weird to think that, like, there was a time where every week, every 2 weeks, like, what now feels like a bona fide classic
Absolutely.
came out. Not to be that guy, but it's just wild.
Well, that's why whenever Top Gun Maverick hits, people act like it's... You know, the second coming because, I mean, we're just
a good movie.
We're just starved for this kind of thing.
Yeah,
something that has that kind of when it's like old Hollywood, right? Where it's a studio picture driven by a movie star, you know, that is, I hate to use these kind of terms, but like 4-quadrant, you know, and appeals to a mass audience, but not in a way that is like in a good way, you know, in a way that's like unifying. I do have one specific question with you because, of course, I do have one specific question for you, which is, now this was Graham Yost's original idea, and he's the sole credited writer. He's a brilliant writer. We'll be discussing several of his other films, such as Broken Arrow and Hard Rain. But one of the things you talk about on your podcast, just to give the listeners a bit of a flavor of the kind of thing that you do on it, is you've discussed the involvement of script doctors like Paul Attanasio and Joss Whedon.
Yeah.
So for our listeners, how would you summarize the contributions that they made to the final product?
That's a big one.
I would
Concise,
say,
as
go
concisely
listen
as
to
you can.
episode number 12 of 50
Okay,
miles
there
per
you
hour.
go.
No, really, that's really special, I think, because no one's ever talked to Paul, first of all, about Speed that I know of. I haven't really seen
I had no idea.
Yeah, that was news to me. People in the industry know about Joss, but not so much Paul.
So Paul, his claim to fame soon after was writing Quiz Show, and he was Oscar nominated for that.
You write Donnie Brasco too?
Yeah.
I think so.
Wait,
I love that movie.
Yeah.
If he didn't, this will be edited out.
Yeah.
But yeah, I believe so. He's a great writer, and at the time was a script doctor, which are these guys that would just be hired to come in and fix a script without any credit. Just they would get paid a boatload of money. And it was guys like Joss Whedon and Paul Attanasio, and they were still early in their career. I mean, this is kind of one of the more famous examples, I guess, is like a John Sayles. It's on so many scripts that you would never know. So, like, they're usually brought in to elevate the material. I think typically, more than anything, it's a cover your ass thing for the studio, so that as a former Fox executive on the podcast, Jorge Saralegui, says, it's like if it fails or something, you can say, well, gosh, I hired whoever. So it's like, you know, my hands are clean. I did what I could. So they come in, and I never really got to the bottom of what the problem was with the script in their eyes and why they needed anything, which is why I think it was just a cover your ass thing. But according to everyone, Paul came in and just completely fucked it up. And what I've been able to surmise is that he added a lot of this backstory stuff to the bus passengers to kind of set them up, and really just went off on his own thing. And this is 3 weeks before they're ready to shoot.
Wow.
In like July of 93. And so that happens. He gets paid. They get rid of him, and they've got to fix it. And what they did was Jorge brought in Walter Parks and Laurie McDonald, who are well-known producers. Walter is a well-known screenwriter. He wrote War Games. And they came in to oversee this young writer that they were going to bring in to fix this. And that writer was Joss Whedon. Joss came in and just gave it his voice. I mean, we know what the Joss Whedon voice is, and that is very much what I think helps really give Speed a lot of its kick. And weeded out some of the Paul stuff, and we're left with, and also he stayed through production, and whenever they needed lines or something, Jan would call him and say, hey, I need a line here, I need a line there. So 95% of the dialogue is Joss Whedon. It's really just punching it up. And sometimes they say it's as simple as, they just need jokes. You need you to make it smarter by writing jokes and things like that. But this is what they did to the script and got it ready for production literally in the 11th hour. And it's a very different script 4 weeks before they go into production than it is as they go into production. And I've tracked down this one draft that exists at the WGA library that I've never seen online. And for some reason, this is the one copy the WGA has. I went there on the first day of the strike, actually. I sat there and read it. And it's the only draft that has, like, Paul's stuff in it that you can really find. And that was really eye-opening. So anyway, if you listen to that episode, you get a much longer explanation.
I love that episode because it's almost like a true crime podcast episode of like it has this like mystery at the center of this movie.
Who did what and who wrote the most iconic line, right? Which is another.
Who wrote Pop Quiz Hotshot became like my rosebud.
Yeah.
Because everybody's always said, that was Joss Whedon. And Joss is like, I didn't write that. I don't even like that line. And I'm like, okay. And so there's a whole journey in that episode of trying to find out.
It's a great episode, especially again if you're interested in the inside baseball stuff. And it's something that for me was, as a screenwriter who has worked for many studios and has been around that process and been involved with it and been sort of on all sides of that type of scenario. It was very fascinating and at the same time slightly psychologically traumatizing. But it is compelling drama, and it really is a very, very interesting. One of the many fascinating insights that you uncover in the show.
They were very candid.
Yeah,
it was great.
Pulls no punches. It's really great stuff. You get the real juice instead of the sanitized what people say to the press.
Yeah, it's impressive how honest people are. Maybe because it's 30 years ago, but like I particularly like Jorge Saralegui is like every time he comes on the show, I'm like, oh my god,
guy's a gold mine.
Talk about keeping it real,
and also just like no fluff, no bullshit.
Yeah. Can I talk about how I found him?
Sure, please.
I interviewed, rest in peace, John Wright, the editor of the film, who was nominated for Speed and for The Hunt for Red October.
Oh my god.
And he was like telling me about how the studio didn't have faith in the movie, and he was like, the exec would come in the editing room and just be like, they don't have faith in this. I think his name was Jorge. And I'm like, I've never heard of a Jorge. And the thing about studio executives involved with developing movies, you can't go to IMDb and be like, who was the executive on this movie? So I'm like, who is Jorge? And I did a dive just into Variety Archives, which is like a very crucial resource that I hope they continue to protect. And I found a Jorge in one of the listings, like in one of the articles. It was like Jorge Saralegui. I'm like, there he is.
Oh, wow.
Once I had the last name, he was easy to find. But like just going from John saying Jorge, and I'm like, who's Jorge? And just kind of trying to find, because I Googled Jorge Speed. Like, I'm like, who is this? and finally found him. And he agreed to talk to me. And we talked for 4 hours. And he just sat me down and just told me, and I believe every word he says because he's got no reason to like.
He's giving you the real shit.
Yeah. And he's also like self-effacing, and so it's just like he was just a gold mine. I love it every time I get to bring in his
Every time
perspective.
his voice comes on the show, I'm like, this is going to be great.
Well, I also think, I was prepping for this the other day, and I was watching the film, and it made me realize, like, this is the first time I watch Speed like once a year, but I was like, this is the first time I've watched it since I've started listening to 50 miles per hour. And I had this really great moment, and, it's a testament where you recognize names now that you didn't recognize before. Like, you're not just thinking about Jan de Bont. You're not just thinking about Keanu Reeves. You're sort of like, basking and like, I know more about these people. I know the work they did. And it is interesting because Jorge Saraleguy's name is not in that opening scrawl, but it gives a testament to like the good creative development that can happen when someone like believes in a project. And it's not that it's thankless for him, but like he believed in something. He had the tools to marshal it. And when you have that person in Hollywood that's really there to do that, amazing things can happen. And it's a testament to that.
And that was after one studio had already rejected it. You know, I've got a whole thing on the development at Paramount with Don Granger, who is now oversees the film division at Skydance, and
Yeah.
speaking of Top Gun Maverick. So like, yeah, I appreciate being able to pull these guys out of the shadows a bit. And,
Yeah, no, it's great. And it's like no one would know.
yeah.
And I think that is like
it is almost like a detective story that you're unfolding as
Yeah.
you realize who are all the contributors to this perfect piece of art.
Yeah.
That's a worthy pursuit.
Speaking of perfect pieces of art, can you tell us how Die Hard and Speed connect in our section Die Hard DNA?
I'd be delighted to.
Thank you.
So yes, this is the section where we outline the connections between the movie that we're doing and, of course, the original classic. As with Die Hard, Speed was made and distributed by 20th Century Fox. It was directed by Jan de Bont, who was the director of photography on Die Hard. It also has the same production designer as Die Hard, Jackson Degovia. Of course, it's set in LA. It starts with a terrorist attack inside a skyscraper, then deals with terrorism in other confined spaces. The hero is an independent-minded maverick cop who is highly adept at improvising and problem-solving while under extreme pressure. The main hero also has a friendly LAPD ally who's peripheral to the action for most of the movie. The hero and the villain are apart for most of the movie and rarely interact in the same physical space. The villainous terrorist is motivated by money rather than ideology.
Is this the longest list of these you've done? Probably.
I have to bring like my A game because you're on the show,
Phil is
right?
literally about to levitate. He's so excited.
There's also a subtle class dimension to the film, which is something that you talk about, like how it's this sort of cross section of blue collar LA residents caught up in the ensuing mayhem. And also, I'm interested to get your thoughts on this as the final point, if this is something that you've ever come across or if you're planning to do anything about it. We talked about this in detail in our episode on Ricochet, the 1991 Denzel action thriller. There's an argument to be made, and it was made by a critic whose name is Daniel Baldwin, as I recall, who wrote a whole piece about this, that Speed actually takes place in the same extended cinematic universe as Die Hard, aka the Valverde mega movieverse. The two films are directly connected via the use of the fictitious Pacific Courier Company, which is the logo that appears on the truck that Hans Gruber and the team first arrive in, and it's also the logo that appears on the side of the plane that the bus in Speed eventually crashes into at the airport. That's because of the production designer Jackson Degovia did both films, so that was his way of connecting them. I don't think he did. Okay. I'd have to fact check that.
That logo is also on the truck that explodes at the beginning of Die Hard with a Vengeance.
Exactly. Yeah, that was another.
You guys should do a Valverde 25 episode podcast.
Am I missing anything, Chris, in terms of connections that you can think of between Die Hard and Speed?
But just because there's clearly so many. But I do appreciate the shout out of Jack. We've got him coming up on the show.
Oh, great. That's awesome. Yeah, this is like the platonic ideal of a Die Hard on a blank. I think it is. It's a watershed moment for our
kind of embodies
conversations.
the phrase, but I do have a hot take that I'm going to throw at you guys
goodness.
in a second. So we'll move on to our section called The Anatomy of an Action Movie.
I'm sorry.
Yes,
before
please.
you do, they were literally deriding this movie as about Die Hard on a bus as they were making it.
Yeah.
Wow. So it absolutely embodies the spirit of what you're doing here.
Yeah.
I mean,
that's
the studio, the actors, they were literally calling it Die Hard on a bus.
As if it in a pejorative way,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
In a derisive way.
Yeah.
Well, we here at Die Hard on a Blank don't think that Die Hard ripoffs are bad. We think they're the greatest art that cinema has to contribute to the world.
Relationship to them.
So now, as we say, this is probably the most cited example of a film that embodies the phrase Die Hard on a blank, okay, right? It's very commonly known as Die Hard on a bus. But here is my hot take, guys.
Okay.
You ready for this?
You ready? You've heard it here first.
Speed is not Die Hard on a bus.
It's been nice to be here, guys. I'll see you.
Yeah, I gotta listen. I'm gonna go with Chris because I don't know what's happening.
Hear me out. Okay, now you might say, okay, no, it's Die Hard on an elevator, then Die Hard on a bus, then Die Hard on a subway train. But actually, none of that is strictly true, and I think it does Speed a tremendous disservice to refer to it that way because
Chris is back.
The Die Hard formula, right, is typically bad guys take over a blank, right, as we talked about, toy soldiers, prep school. Battleship in Under Siege, plane in Passenger 57, right? It's a bunch of henchmen with machine guns taking over a confined physical space, right? That's not what Speed is. It's actually way better than that. Yes, as we just outlined in Die Hard DNA, there are a lot of connections, but it is incredibly reductive reading to call Speed simply Die Hard on a bus. Now, there obviously are Die Hard echoes in there and also echoes of the 1975 Japanese film, The Bullet Train. I don't know if you ever watched that one.
I've never seen it.
I just watched it. It's actually available on Tubi.
God
for
bless
free
Tubi, guys.
right now.
I'm going to write that down.
It's
Bullet
dubbed,
Train.
but it's actually a really kind of cool movie. It's kind of a hip vibe to it. It's actually like an interesting cross between taking a Pelham 123 and Unstoppable. It's actually pretty cool movie. And it's also got elements of the 1985 film Runaway Train, which I don't know if you've ever seen that, Liam, but that's a Venn diagram of you, right?
Yeah,
Konchalovsky, Kurosawa script,
That's
and
like
an
literally
80s action movie.
Yeah, I'm obsessed with Runaway Train.
It's an amazing movie with three
Did you talk
incredible
about it on the show?
performances.
Absolutely, because Runaway Train is what spurred the idea for Graham to write this.
That's right.
And it was a misunderstanding because Graham's father, sorry to interrupt you there.
Go ahead.
Graham's father, Elwy Yost, used to host a show on Canadian television, Saturday Night at the Movies, which was like just a kind of talk show about movies, which sounds fantastic. But he kind of got the plot description wrong when he conveyed it to Graham. He was like, "Yeah, it's about this train. It's a Kurosawa script about this train that'll blow up if it slows down." And then they saw it. Graham saw the movie. He's like, "Oh no, it just can't slow down. And they can't get to the brakes, and it's not quite that." But what if? And he was like, "It'd be better if it would be a bus." And so that's what I mean. Speed owes a debt to Akira Kurosawa.
How
the
cool
point
is that?
here.
Yeah. Akira Kurosawa on a blank?
Oh my God.
So the Bullet Train, basically, the premise of the Bullet Train, and not to be confused with the Brad Pitt recent movie, the Bullet Train from 1975, the concept of it is that the train can't go below 80 miles an hour or 100 kilometers an hour or it will explode. So it does have some derivation from that concept, which, as you say, is sort of filtered through a couple of misinterpretations. But in defense of Speed, that's it. A train by necessity is going through like a one track. It's not going through a city. There's no traffic. There's no complications. They have to come up with a bunch of different things to. So it's not like it's not derivative, even though there is a similarity with that concept. This is actually a completely new story paradigm, in my opinion, within American action movies, where the ticking clock is the premise. And I would suggest that this quote: "There's a bomb on a bus. Once the bus goes above 50 miles per hour, the bomb is armed. If it drops below 50, the bomb blows up. What do?" is the greatest premise, the greatest hook, the greatest embedded ticking clock in the history of contemporary, action movies or in movies in general. Has there ever been a better premise than that? Like, what would even be a candidate?
Nothing. I mean, first of all, I totally appreciate that. I do. It is annoying when it's derided as Die Hard on a whatever, because there is so much more going on there, and it's clean, it's perfect. And can you imagine writing that as a spec?
Oh my God.
I mean, you write a spec script. What's your first order of business? Let me write something that can be made. And you're writing a movie about a bus going through traffic and can't slow down, and like, how do you even begin to think about making that, let alone selling that screenplay to somebody? And that Graham said, "I'm going to write this spec." It's a ballsy premise. If it's not the best premise in the world, it's certainly the most ballsy one I've come across.
It is the best premise in the world.
Yeah,
it is the best premise in the world. I could not think of the only other thing I could think of that is like a even close is Escape from New York. But even that doesn't it does involve a paragraph of explanation. It's the future. New York is has become a prison, and the president has like crashed, and they have to send a guy in to go and get it. Right? It's one of the best premises ever, but it's not as clean as the bomb. If it drops, it's just so easy to understand, and it's such a fascinating conundrum. The second part of it, not to be slept on, is what do you do?
Right. Yeah.
What do you do? That is.
I'd want to know what busted it was.
What do you do? That's what the movie is about, is what do you do to solve a seemingly impossible problem? It is one of the best ideas, is the best idea ever.
And my take on it, too, is that the movie is about what is inherent in those four words: pop, quiz, hot shot. The movie is about thinking on your feet.
Mm-hmm.
Stay on or get off. We're going to tip over. Everybody get on this side of the bus. There's the airport. Ooh, we can circle the runway. Get off here fast. Mm-hmm. There's an incline. Floor it. You know, it's about that. And so the fact that that is sort of crystallized in those 4 words that I spend an entire episode trying to figure out who wrote is kind of awesome. I mean, I can't think of too many movies where the theme is so baked into its premise in that way.
Exactly, and there were imitators and emulators of this movie, which I'll talk about that at the end of the show in terms of its influence, its own influence and legacy apart from Die Hard, albeit sort of running parallel. But why don't we move on to our section about let's talk about Speed. You've just teed it up beautifully. Speed as an experience.
Yeah,
the experience of watching this movie, because this is an experiential movie. It isn't just a movie. You were talking about that off mic.
Well,
it was fascinating what you were saying.
I mean, so I've seen Speed many times, and one thing that occurred to me in the rewatch, and I watched it 2 nights in a row. I watched it the night before last and last night, and I had a very emotional experience watching it.
Go check out his live tweeting session of it. It's
really
good.
was like, I love this movie.
We cry over action movies.
Yeah, I watched that and Masters
We're
of the
also
Universe,
tired
and I
dads.
cried. Yeah,
So
you get it. So one of the things that's so interesting about it is that Speed, and I mean this in the best way possible, feels longer than it actually is. Like, when you're watching the movie, you're like, oh, and then there's the bit when it's amazing how quickly the things that you just pointed at, the bomb, the first bus explodes, he gets on the bus, the thing with the Jaguar, the whole into the guy gets shot and he takes over. The entire sort of sequencing of the movie happens so fast.
Yeah.
Like, there's not a breath anywhere in this movie, and yet I feel like I've lived on that bus in the watching of it, and I just had this experience where I was like, I am so present in what's happening that I feel as though I've invented parts of the movie being on the bus. Like, I've lived it. And it's really crazy because the opening elevator sequence is like 22 minutes or something like that.
Yeah.
And then the train stuff, the post-bus stuff is like 30 minutes. So you're really only on the bus for an hour.
An hour, yeah.
And yet, every time I watch the movie, I kind of forget that it's not just a movie about being on a bus.
Totally.
Yeah.
I mean, it's Sonia Jackson plays one of the passengers on the bus, and she put it to me like when she went to the premiere with her friend said she had to just walk around the block to just disperse the energy.
Yeah.
Like it gets you so amped up. And that's part of the reasons, I was saying how it's such a great specimen for analysis. I'm such a fan of craft and how movies are made. And I mean, that was the goal. Jan wanted this to be experiential. He wanted, and I can't think of a greater success when you set out to do a certain thing and you literally feel like you lived it when you come off of that bus, when you come off of that subway.
Back to school savings are officially in session at Tanger Outlets. Shop tax-free August 2nd through 6th and save up to 70% off the latest school styles. The best of apparel, footwear, accessories, and more. Save at Nike Factory Store, American Eagle, Gap Outlet, Crocs, Under Armour, Banana Republic Factory, and hundreds more. There's always something happening. Discover the latest fun and events all season long. Tanger Outlets, your savings destination.
One of the things that I think we're contractually obligated on every episode to mention is Paul Verhoeven. He plays like a big part in our brains and
so
how
if you're playing Die Hard
it.
on a blank bingo,
yeah,
tick it off.
We just ticked Paul Verhoeven off the list. But the fact that Jan de Bont shot movies for him, they worked together for so long, and not to reduce de Bont, of course, but the fact that he shot for Paul Verhoeven, who was so documentary minded in his early career, his first films were documentaries. This does feel at times like you're watching a documentary. And I don't mean that in a glib way. Like, they capture things that are staged, of course. It's an action movie with a budget. And yet, there are so many moments where all of a sudden you enter the action, like the barber shop. When they're in the barber shop towards the end of the movie watching the drop for the money, de Bont makes this choice to kind of come from across the barbershop and zoom in on Joe Morton next to Keanu Reeves. And he kind of turns and hands someone something. I'm like, this looks like the cameraman just turned and captured this. It's unbelievable.
It's like you're looking through someone's eyes. No, absolutely. Let's talk about this because this is something I think it makes it different than Die Hard. Die Hard is a slick studio movie. Yep. There's nothing really slick about Speed. It's not pretty, right? Despite being made by a cinematographer. The camera's always where it needs to be. And going back to his collaborations with Jan and just coming up through film school in the Netherlands, and these guys were coming off of being really inspired by the French New Wave movement, which is all about just capturing the reality of mundanity and just the day-to-day and how that can be riveting. And so apply that to action movies, you get Speed. And that's kind of fascinating to me.
We've talked about this a little bit, like how Tarantino talked about the difference between him and Tony Scott and how he saw himself as a composer of images and he saw Tony Scott as a selector of images because he would shoot so much footage, right? Now, and this is, apart from one or two shots, this doesn't feel like a particularly composed movie in terms of its like visual style, which goes back to Verhoeven and The Fourth Man and Jan de Bont's roving camera style and how you see some of that in Die Hard, but as you say, it's a more aesthetically composed picture. This is a more incredibly staged, a visceral reality to it.
The theme of the movie with What Do You Do? Like, and everything's happening in a breathless sort of like, and by the way, we'll talk about him, but nobody makes decisions or thinks in a movie quite like Keanu Reeves does in this movie. Like, you just see things passing over his head. And, like, it's extraordinary. I think he's extraordinary in this movie because you see him thinking through quickly everything, and the camera captures that.
There's a passive quality to the performance that works for the role because he's a police officer, so he's constantly trying to figure something out. And who better to try to figure stuff out than somebody like Keanu Reeves? I've rarely seen someone more perfectly utilized in an action film.
Oh, he's unbelievable.
Well, let's move on to that section then,
let's
right?
Talk about it,
so our next section of Anatomy of an Action Movie is the hero, Keanu Reeves as Jack Traven. Why is this character so appealing?
Because he feels like somebody you'd meet tomorrow. That's the DNA of Die Hard a little bit, is that everyman quality, I think. He's not like a muscle-bound Arnold. You guys just talked to Nick DeSemlian. I just talked to Nick DeSemlian.
Oh, great. Shout out to Nick.
Nick had this great point that, like, when Keanu is standing there with those SWAT guys, he feels like one of the SWAT guys. If Arnold's standing there, everybody's looking at Arnold.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? There's just something about it goes back to reality. He feels like a guy that you could meet, as opposed to some larger-than-life person. And that's the turning point from the material Nick just exhaustively covered in his fantastic book, by the way.
So good.
And the action movies of the 90s, because then you get guys like Nicolas Cage and Will Smith even. Guys that just feel more normal and aren't just muscleheads.
Denzel Washington.
Yeah.
He's going to start doing action movies around the
Again,
same time.
and it was all the paradigm shift that came after Bruce Willis as John
Right.
McClane. I think as well, like one of the things I love that you zeroed in on 50 miles per hour was the politeness of the character and how that Keanu found that when he was hanging around the real SWAT guys, they called everyone sir and ma'am, and that suddenly gave him like, now I know who this character is. Or I think that may have come from. Maybe that was Joss Whedon as well.
Keanu brought that to Joss because they were working on the character together, and they really just wanted to get away from the one-liner thing. And that was something Keanu brought up, was that these guys are only about diffusing a situation, and how you think about that. If you're Joss, that does completely unlock things for you as a writer. How you're going to depict this guy and how he behaves, and it's unusual, but it's real. It makes sense, you know?
Yeah. What I love about it is that it's, again, Die Hard is similar to this in a different way. It's all about problem solving. It's all about intelligence over brawn.
Yeah.
They're both incredibly courageous characters, McClane and Jack Traven. But in this film in particular, as we said, it's all what do you do in any given moment. It is constant problem solving. And even Harry and Jack play those games with each other to keep their minds sharp and alleviate the boredom. Hence the scenario where he plays out with the shoot the hostage anecdote. This film is all about intellect, you know, even at like high speed. And I fucking love that.
It's the only way that the hero will succeed in this premise, because Dirty Harry on that bus with his gun, what's he going to do?
Right.
What do you do?
It's not about thuggery.
I actually would say it's more than just it's a burgeoning intellect, because there's this scene that I love that I think as a young person I didn't quite understand and now I get, which is when they're celebrating after they get the medals, and Daniels is drunk. And he's kind of like, we got or Morton says, Morton, who's so good in this movie.
He's amazing.
He goes, we got lucky. And Daniels is like, yeah, we got lucky. And I forget what Keanu says, but he goes, do you even listen? Like, and he's like, because I'm not going to be around to back you up. Guts will only get you so far, and then they'll get you killed.
Yep.
And to me, it's like, That's sort of the like, if we're like using traditional screenwriting, that's like the kickoff of the hero's journey,
it's
right?
a turning
because
point.
he has to, earlier in the film, he's all like, let's save these people. Like he's always making these proactive choices, but they're all coming like kind of from his like, I'm the tough guy.
They're coming more from ego, right?
Where he
he's
has
like
to
a
get on the
gung-ho cowboy at first, which is really cool. He's chewing the gum. He's just kind of like zero fucks, but he wants to be a hero, but there's a sort of slightly recklessness to it.
Yep.
But that scene is absolutely key because thereafter, his actions are completely different. The tenor of his, the way that he relates to people, is
it's a great contrast.
empathetic and professional.
It's a great contrast to the scene when Ortiz and the other guy are arguing, and he just he like shuts everybody up, and then he just looks at everybody, and it's like he calms it down by not saying anything, by not escalating it, like you said, and you can see him making decisions to be a leader in those moments.
One of my favorite tweets of all time, by the way, is someone put that scene up where they're barking at each other, and someone was like, "This scene is Twitter in a nutshell." But no, one of the people I spoke to, brilliant guy, Alex Papademos, wrote a book about Keanu Reeves called Keanu Reeves Most Triumphant that you should absolutely read if you haven't. And I think I'm a smart guy, but I had never thought about the movie in these terms, and what you just brought up is sort of what he was laying out, how the movie is about Jack Traven learning to be cool, to just chill and disarm the situation. And it's funny because that entire first, the elevator sequence is the one thing that throughout development never really changed. So you can see the DNA of late 80s brawny action in that, the gum, the kind of cocksure stuff, and the rest of the script is what really developed further. And it makes the movie the pivot point, really, between the 80s and the 90s.
He's glib in that scene because he even says, "There's anything else that'll stop this elevator from falling?"
Yeah, the basement.
Yeah, that's quite a callous, glib thing to say.
Yeah.
He's not like that on the bus.
Yeah.
He's deeply concerned about the preservation of human life and de-escalation.
That's a good point.
It's almost like a game for him in the elevator sequence. But after that speech from Harry, that's what this film really is. Oh my gosh, this film is fucking amazing.
You're right. You're right.
This film is fucking amazing.
Chris is like, yeah, I agree.
All right, so why don't we talk about our second hero?
One thing I just want to say, my
go ahead.
absolute favorite line is when he goes, "Mac, we're boned."
Oh, it's so good.
Love that.
I use that. I don't know if the episode's aired yet, but I'm kind of laying out a quick chronology as I'm going through some stuff, and I'm like, soon enough they're boned, and then blah 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 blah.
Oh, yeah,
it's so good.
He's so.
It is the perfect synchronicity of character and actor at the perfect moment in their career. What I did find strange was how everyone on your podcast, how all of these execs and all these casting people are like, we don't know if they'll buy Keanu as an action hero, and I'm like, did you not see Point Break?
Yeah,
why aren't people giving Point Break more credence?
Here's where I get argumentative. I don't think Point Break is an action movie, but part of that is because I probably just want Speed to be the beginning of his action career. Speed is obviously the movie that made him a worldwide superstar. I think of Point Break, and it's like, to me, it's not an action movie in the same way that Heat isn't an action movie. It's that weird kind of gray area for action where the stuff would be at the action section and Blockbuster, but you're like, really? Obviously, there's extreme sports and like some cool action scenes. I don't think The Fugitive is an action movie.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. Like,
I have a question though. So is it because I think about Point Break and Man in this way that it's like there's like a romance to the relationship between the two men, and it's like almost a drama with action out. Like I know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Like Point Break is like more about vibes, like than it is necessarily the bank robber.
I mean, I would
stuff,
just say, like, it's, in my opinion, it's an action thriller, and within some of the most exhilarating, like, dynamic action sequences, especially the chases, and it also has an experiential quality to it, right? Like that foot chase, the way that Bigelow shoots that, like, point of view, head on, it brings you into the headspace of the characters, and then jumping out the plane, some of which was done for real with Swayze actually kind of doing that and stuff. Plus, he's sort of a hotshot jock cop. So to me, I do find it slightly mystifying that there was like any doubt that Keanu could do this. But your point is well taken.
Well, first of all, it tells you how Point Break has grown in stature. I think maybe at the time, the kind of specter of Bill and Ted was too great.
Yeah.
And what's funny to me is they all say, oh, he's too young, he's too young. Meanwhile, the guy they wanted to play him was Charlie Sheen.
Yeah.
Who I think was a year older or something. I can't remember exactly.
That's what you said, yep.
But yeah, like, that just tells you how much Keanu was just perceived as a kid.
Right, yeah. And I can kind of see that, but I think it would have been a mistake because if you look at like Charlie in Navy SEALs, very glib character, can do action, but just wouldn't have had what we're talking about now that actually unconsciously makes you truly love this character because he isn't glib or flippant in the way that I think Charlie Sheen would have been.
Yeah.
But let's move on to our section about the other
romance.
hero. The other hero in this movie. Right? It's not just romance, I would say. There is obviously a romance.
But this is maybe the greatest romance of all time. I don't know what to say.
With no sex on screen.
In this movie is also the second hero. And really, you know, we've sometimes we carve out this section sometimes where we talk about the leading lady, and often they're, frankly, from this era, somewhat passive, damsels in distress.
Yeah.
I think this is the best female leads that we have done on this show. We've had some good ones like Anne Archer in Narrow Margin, was a really good one, but she's not really driving the action. It's just a great performance in a great drama that is also quite a similar movie, actually. It's all on the train, quite a kinetic movie. But I think this is the best the best female character we've had in a movie. Why do we love Sandra Bullock as Annie in this movie so much?
Because we love Sandra Bullock.
Yeah.
If I don't think anything would be more heartbreaking than to find out one day that Sandra Bullock was a gigantic asshole. Like, she is such a delight and apparently has been throughout her career. I mean, I've interviewed her a couple of times, but I've got this episode coming up where I talk to all the passengers as I was talking about, and that is a Sandra Bullock love fest. Yeah. I mean, they adored her. I don't know. It's both tangible and intangible, I guess. I mean, she's just she oozes pleasantry and
realness. She feels very
she's
real.
very real. Yeah, I mean, there's that girl next door, America's Sweetheart thing, sure, but it's just that is a singular personality in the history of movies, and she really brings it. It really comes to life in this movie.
I want to just ask you about something specifically about the evolution of this character, and I think it actually perfectly illustrates your point, because there were other iterations of this character that did other professions, right? One of which is basically a spin-off for Michael Bay's Ambulance to some extent, right? Like, it was an ambulance driver, female ambulance driver named Darlene at one point, which is also my wife's name, and she loves this movie. So I wanted to just give her a shout out. But what can you tell us about the evolution of this character? Because in a way, there's almost nothing there. We know nothing about Annie's backstory. We know, apart from the fact she went to University of Arizona, which is more of a plot point. We don't know what she did. We don't know what her profession is. I think it's completely stripped down, and it's just all Sandra Bullock's charm. Yeah. But can you just tell us about how it reached this point and the other iterations?
Yeah. Well, she was an ambulance driver. The thing was, Graham was trying to figure something out the whole time, which was, how is she going to be so good at driving this bus? So there was early drafts when it was in development at Paramount. This stuff got weeded out. It was a much darker script. There was a lot of stuff about addiction, and Jack had hurt his knee in the beginning, and so he was on pain pills the whole time. And Darlene was an ex-addict ambulance driver. And the story is they went out to Halle Berry. She said no and regretted it ever since. But that was when they were trying to cast big in this role and maybe put someone lesser than in the Jack Trevin role. So it started there. He also thought about making her a comedian who teaches a stand-up driving school. I mean, just nonsense. Not just, again,
very
trying to figure out trying to make her, why would she be funny and why would she drive? Oh, she's a stand-up comedian who teaches a driving school. Like, just crazy stuff.
Nose.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And that stuff got weeded out. Again, that was still in there a month before production. I mean, this stuff really came together in the final hours. And ultimately, the character, you wouldn't know this except for a deleted scene, is a graphic designer. What else would you? I mean, it doesn't matter, but that's what she is. And so it's funny. There's this story Laurie McDonald tells about. She came up with the line, I've had my license revoked. Why? For speeding. So it's just like something to throw in there to explain why she'd be adept at doing this. But then that's all you need. And really nobody has a backstory. You don't really know anything about Jack other than what you see in the first act,
Sometimes, character is action. It's just how this character behaves in this situation defines their character. It's not relevant that she's a graphic designer. Mm-hmm. It's not relevant. It is interesting. I do like she says that lovely line that does feel like a rom-com line when Sam lets her on the bus and she says, you're a good good, kind man, and one day people will write songs about you.
Yeah.
You
She
know?
has the cigarette. It's just
Also
just
that was apparently a debate,
her?
by the way.
Really?
I've not put this into the podcast. I haven't really found out where there's nowhere to really throw in the soundbite, but that was a discussion. Should she smoke or not?
Oh, interesting. Well, she barely
subtly
smoked.
enough that you never actually really see it. But
Yeah.
When you were talking about the gum, the improvisation of the gum,
Yeah.
like I'm so like this movie lives so rent free in my head that I literally out loud in my kitchen was like, I got gum on my seat. Gum.
We say that every 5 minutes in our house, not because there's literally gum on the seat, just because we love that line. But Liam, talk about this then as a obviously she's amazing as an individual character, but as you've just alluded to, this is also an incredible romance.
Well, yeah, I mean, my favorite shot in this movie is the shot towards the end when they literally exit the bus, going on the sort of panel underneath it, and they slide under, and they're wrapped in each other's arms, and the score swells in a way that it never swells anywhere else in the movie. And to me, it's like, I find it very moving for a variety of reasons, because like there's 3 moments in this movie where they're sort of clasped in each other. One is when they go over the jump and he kind of just covers her. And then there's this moment, and then there's the moment at the end when they hold each other on the train. And it's like, the first one is like him protecting her. The second one is him protecting her. But the third one is like they're in love. Like, this is a great love story, but I like it as a love story because it's driven. They literally say it, like, relationships based on stressful situations don't last, which is really interesting. But there's all these things that happen in the movie where they really get to know each other, where, you know, he learns her name, he learns that she was speeding, like they're strategizing through things. And then there's this great moment when he gets on that thing to go under the bus to try to disarm the bomb. And I watched it 3 times, and he's about to go under. And she's such a good actress because she makes it about 2 things. One, she makes it about like, oh my God, I'm driving this bus and I'm going to kill this guy. And I just met him. And like, I've been on this bus for 3 hours. And like, you forget as an audience member, these people don't know each other, right? Mm-hmm. And that, I think, is just amazing. I think this is a great movie about the community of LA as a whole, just Absolutely. As a side note. Like, it feels intrinsic to the city. But this specific relationship, she says, oh my God, he is crazy. And Sandra Bullock is such a good actress that she's like, I'm kind of into this guy. He's kind of into me. But he's going under a bus.
She's clocking this.
Yeah, she's clocking it. And then he disarms the bomb and he pulls himself up and they're leaking gas. And it's like watching someone make a look. You know, there's a sequel to this movie that he's not in. So like we could debate the fictional whatever.
For the purpose of today, that
there
doesn't
is
exist.
No sequel to this movie.
Yeah,
no.
I know. Normally I'm the guy that says that. But there's something beautiful about the fact that like it's as much about their relationship. Yeah. And that moment when they slide off the bus and there's that, it really is very, very moving to me because I'm 100%. Like, it's an action movie that like also is a great like reductive to say like a meet cute. Like it really works on that level, and I just think it's extraordinary.
There's a reason we are all Keanu Sandra shippers to this day. You know, somebody tweeted a nice thread the other day about this, how the movie is sort of. I wish I could remember specifically what they said, but the essence of it was that it takes rom-com beats and applies them to action film. Mm. And when you start to think about it in those terms, it's absolutely true. And what's funny, obviously not willful, nobody sat down to write this screenplay and said, I'm going to place a rom-com beat into this. You know,
right.
That's not how it was structured, but it's how it came out in the sort of, alchemy of making it.
Right. It is just, I just think that is absolutely incredible. And
I totally agree. I mean, the moment, when the music soars and they slide out, I get choked up just talking about it. I mean,
that cue is prominently used in the Braveheart trailer. Go back and watch it.
Wait, really?
Yeah. Whenever he throws the sword, and it goes flying through there, that's the speed score right there.
It does something to your heart and soul.
The strings,
piece of music.
the addition of the strings.
It's really extraordinary. And by the way, just a quick second on Mark Mancina's score. This is one of the best action movie scores or movie scores, period, like that there's ever been. It really contributes to just how exhilarating this film is from the beginning. Even the credits are like, get you jacked.
It's kind of a gift to the pod. I mean, of course, that it begins with that every time because you're immediately like, I'm in speed. You know
totally,
what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, it's really, I mean, it's incredible. It's incredible.
He was just hanging out in Hans Zimmer's shop, one of his kind of team of guys that worked there, and Hans suggested him. And
that's amazing.
There's a story about how they wanted Michael Kamen naturally.
Of Die Hard fame.
Yes, and but Jan really wanted Mark. My guess is Mark was cheaper. But it's such a creative score, and there will be an episode down the line where I dive deep into that.
I can't wait for that.
Yeah,
it's a remarkable.
I feel like everyone's getting a good preview of where the podcast is going.
This podcast is now a preview of all things to come on 50 miles per hour.
That's amazing.
Well, let's talk about like the episode that that you just did not when this aired, but we just because it'll be a minor delay. But I just listened to your amazing tee-up episode about the villain of this movie, Dennis Hopper as Howard Payne. And this was fascinating to hear about how difficult this part was to cast, how it had various iterations. Do you want to just talk briefly about that journey and what led up to Dennis Hopper? And then I have a specific question for you guys about his performance.
It's quite a journey because and again, this was the case all the way up until a month before they shot. Harry was the villain for the longest time, was revealed to be the bad. I mean, there was a bomber for the elevator. Character. Yes. For the elevator sequence at the beginning, there was this guy named Rudy. It was a really bad character and sort of hung as a specter that Jack was like paranoid about throughout the movie. But then it turns out, no, your partner ends up being the guy with the bus plot. So the elevator plot and the bus plot end up being two different things. And Walter Parks made the suggestion, no, it should just be one guy the whole way through and a separate guy. And so that's how it came to be Howard Payne. Now they have this villain they want to cast, and they don't cast him until 2 weeks into production. As Mark Gordon says in that episode, he's out there on the freeway, buses flying by him. He's on the phone with the studio. How about this guy? How about that guy? And they wanted whoever was most famous who hadn't said no yet for the money. And there was like no reason for anyone to do it.
Do you know how much the money was? Sorry.
I actually don't.
Okay.
I actually don't. But I'm sure it was less than what Keanu got, and we know what Keanu got.
Yeah.
So I say I'm sure, but who knows? You know what? I'm going to track that down.
Oh, wow.
Yes. But because I've never thought to even dig into that. But because it's not like I can go ask Dennis Hopper. Rest in peace.
Rest in peace.
Just the GOAT. But the list of names they went to for this thing is out of control. I mean, Robert Duvall, Jeff Bridges, Sean Penn, Gary Oldman, Alan Rickman. I love Joss Whedon's pitch for Charles Grodin.
Incredible.
I mean,
that was fascinating.
God.
It would have been
I can
different,
kind of see it.
Yeah.
And so Dennis, I mean, the big note here is Christopher Walken would have done it. He was shooting The Prophecy, and he just wanted to take a break before shooting again. And they couldn't do it. And he was like, well, I'm not going to do it then. Can you imagine? Like, that's how close this came.
Well, what I
Pop
found...
quiz.
Oh, don't do it, because I was going to do it. I've thought about this before. Like, can you imagine that speech from Christopher Walken?
Let's give you the board.
There's a bomb on a bus. I don't have a good Chris Walken.
That was great.
On a bus.
What do you do?
Quiz.
What I thought was really interesting about that, though, was that although Walken would be fascinating, and it's always like fascinating, de Bont felt he had death in his eyes, and I think it's really, really interesting that what Walken did. That's why he wasn't as keen on that casting, right? To quote what came up in your show, and I think that was so astute, because with Keanu is playing a very stoic, controlled, contained character. You need something that is a different energy, and then you have Hopper, wild, manic, unrestrained,
amazing.
Alive,
a twinkle in his
alive,
eye.
A twinkle in his eye. Exactly. I think Keanu said that himself, right?
Yeah.
They really drew that. Those kind of subtleties are so huge when you talk about, to use your word again, the alchemy of casting, right? You need like different shades, different energies, different tonalities. They all need to be ultimately cohesive, but it had to be a strong contrast to what Keanu was doing in this movie. So for me, this was like the perfect guy. And what I also thought was so interesting in the most recent episode I listened to, which was the first one about Dennis Hopper, was how he talked about how he shaded this character so that you could understand him a little, see him as like a sad character.
He talks about Keanu as his son or something.
Yeah.
I thought that was so interesting.
You really don't sleep on the fact that like this isn't just just Hopper rocking up and being Hopper, right?
Yeah.
Like he's actually carved out a very thoughtful, shaded, nuanced performance. Like I love the bit where Keanu says to him, like, they think you're bullshit. And he's like, they don't think that. And you actually feel like he feels very insecure and belittled by that. It's a brilliant performance that has a lot more sophistication than you might think.
There's a moment in the movie when he's talking to Jack on the phone and Jack doesn't respond to him. And he says, Jack. Like he has this like moment of weakness and then it escalates into aggression suddenly. And if you don't know what I mean, just go back and look at that and how he plays that. I'm sure it wasn't something he actively thought of, but I've always been taken with that reading for some reason because it's like, Jack, because he feels like he's losing control for a minute and then he grabs control again. And yeah, there's just little things like that throughout the performance. I talked to Mark Harris at length about
can't wait.
Dennis Hopper, and Mark makes the point that he understood that this role was not a plunge into darkness, and that was kind of what it needed. There's just a spark that, I mean, again, they cast this 2 weeks in. He was the joke from Mark Gordon, number 44 on the list. Like, they weren't looking at him.
Should have been number 1.
They got the best person.
Absolutely.
They got the best person in all 3 of these roles, and I would even add Jeff Daniels. I think there's something just
and
perfectly...
Joe Morton, too.
Joe Morton is incredible.
Yeah. Oh, my God.
I love that guy. My wife's who, but by the way, this is I've watched a lot of movies for this podcast, but like my wife was like, "Are you putting on Speed?" I was like, "Yeah," and she was like, "Again?" I was like, "Yeah," and she was like, "Okay, I'll watch." Like,
what happened to us like a few months ago, because I was actually saving this for the show, and I'd bought the 4K and everything, and I was sitting on it, but it came on like TNT or something, and I said to my wife, "Oh, it's a shame we're going to have to it's a shame this is on because we'll have to turn it off." And she was like, "Why would we turn it off?" And we watched the whole thing.
It's an absolute
and you just can't. It just sucks you in.
It was on USA the other night.
I saw you tweeted that. I have a specific moment I want to talk about with Dennis Hopper, which there's 2. One is I love the detail of him eating peanut butter and jelly and drinking Coke and watching football. I just think it like humanizes him in this way.
And him trying to open that Coke with some difficulty because of his
too
thumb.
Much caffeine, guys. I'm a little worried about him.
Yeah.
And 2, the moment when he goes, interactive TV, Jack, wave at the future.
so
and then
funny.
He looks at the camera. He almost buzzes the camera. And I think what he's actually looking at is like one of the screens on the table. But it's like a moment that's so weird where you're like,
whoa.
Did Dennis Hopper just look at the
Did he just get
camera?
meta on us?
Yeah, did he just get meta on us? And I like weirdly I don't ultimately think so.
What
but
an artist
it's an
Dennis Hopper
incredible
was, man.
moment where you feel like this guy's looking at you and you're like, oh.
That would appear to be a Paul Atanasio line, by the way.
Really?
Yeah.
And just such a fascinating moment. Very Verhoeven, if he's actually Verhoeven.
That's 2 for Verhoeven. Ding, ding, ding. Let's move on to our
obligation.
section about the action of this
There's not much to talk about here.
Yeah. Well, here's what I want to. Here's what I want to say.
Hours?
Here's what I want to say. We can keep this relatively brief, but I have a specific question. I look at some people have said like they feel like this movie. If you were being critical, which if you are, you're on the list. But
whoa! Talk about taking
has
a
anyone
dark
seen my
turn.
list? It's getting increasingly long.
Buscemi putting on the lipstick, there.
Especially at the moment. Some people feel like this movie ends when the bus ends. Tarantino actually talked about that in his episode on the Rewatchables
Graham
about
said the same
Unstoppable, right? Some people have that feeling. I don't feel that. I would equate this movie thus. It's a great 3-course meal. You have an amazing starter with the elevator sequence. You have an incredible entree on the bus, and then you get a dessert with the subway train.
Yeah.
So
in the kind of screwdriver or knife in the head at the beginning is like the amuse-bouche.
Sure. Now,
that's getting
what
put
are
on
your
social media. That clip.
I don't
right
want to
there.
list. I don't want to list them all unless you want me to, because I think we all know the movie well enough. But what are your favorite? What's your favorite action scene or action sequence?
I was thinking about this on the drive over. You would want to say the jump. I think it is the derailment of the subway train. Because going back to my thoughts on just being such a fan of craft, what went into achieving that? And this will be a whole dissection later down the line, but just briefly, the sort of fight on top of the subway, they shot that down in Downey at an aircraft manufacturing facility with rear screen projection. just exquisite.
Wow, it doesn't look
massive.
it at all.
Because it was a gigantic, immersive, curved screen.
Oh wow!
Like I don't think they ever did a reverse projection, a rear projection of this scale. There's a lot of like excellent, just.
It looks amazing.
Well, in Terminator 2 is kind of the example of like the stuff you would sort of discover was rear projection in that movie is just exquisite. But this movie, for this sequence, they did that. Then you've got the actual derailment, which is model subway cars that they built and shot. I did this interview with a guy named Dave Drewicki, who was the visual effects director of photography that shot that sequence with Jan. So you've got that. And then you've got the full-scale bus. It's actually a bus made to look like a subway train coming out onto Hollywood Boulevard. So these 3 chunks and just me being just a geek and a fan of film craft, understanding what went into achieving that, I think that's probably my favorite sequence when I really think about it. That's a different way of it being my favorite than as an audience member, what's more visceral and thrilling when I'm watching the movie. But just knowing what went into all of that just really gets me going.
Yes, yeah.
What about you, Liam?
Well, I will come back to that. Just the specific moment when they exit the bus is probably my favorite moment in the movie. But I want to talk a little bit about the elevator because I think the elevator gets short shrift.
We need to talk about that.
And I think one of the reasons the elevator gets short shrift, and I think this applies to Die Hard, is that there are 8 people on that elevator, something like that. And I feel like I know every single one of them. Like, I love the moment. I wrote down this at the beginning, and I hope this isn't crass, but like that woman who taps the guy on the shoulder, the blonde lady who taps the guy on the shoulder and the guy on the elevator is like, you know instantly that she's in a relationship with this guy, that something's going on between them, that like, thanks for pushing that, Bob. You know, just the dynamics between people are so clearly defined. And like, you know, when you get on an elevator and there are people that know each other on the elevator and they have some kind of in-joke and they say something and you as a non-member of the group is kind of like, I don't know what they're talking about. Like, you immediately just feel like these people are real and there's a dynamic on this elevator as opposed to like a bunch of anonymous people on an elevator. Like, that's what getting in and off of an elevator in a multi-purpose building is like. Like, it is Die Hard to Ian in the sense that you're like, all of these people are individual people and they feel like real people. And so when they're trapped in the elevator, despite them having very little actual screen time, I'm like, this is great action movie acting. This is great action movie casting because like the dynamics of these people are present.
And by the way, some of those folks are just friends of producers.
Exactly.
Like,
but they're amazing.
I've talked to a couple of them. I didn't do as exhaustive a thing as I did with the bus passengers, but yeah, I mean that sequence is so good. And Jan crushes that. Just the way he shot it, and that was a precarious situation. The way because they built an elevator shaft over there on the Fox lot, and that was a more dangerous sequence than anything else shot in the movie.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Just because of how I don't want to say cavalier, but just like. Camera assistants and guys that rack focus, they're nuts anyway.
Yeah.
And they're out there walking out onto beams without like eye hooks holding them back and stuff. Like there was a lot of just safety stuff
that like stresses
made
me
people
out.
clench. Yeah. Oof. But and the guy and the way that elevator is being operated, it's by a guy looking at like a monitor way up top he didn't even have a monitor. He was just sort of gauging it on like a radio and was sort of dropping it with this crane whenever they would tell him to drop it. Like, no, drop it a little more, drop it. And it's just like, it's crazy how you wouldn't do shit like this at all.
It wouldn't go over.
No.
Well, and I think, you know, along with that, Jan de Bont, who we haven't like sung his praises enough here, I think. But I can just see, you know, these people show up, they're working for like a couple days, right? You know, whatever it is. And some of them are not actually actors. So you have to imagine that he as a director is going up to them being like, you two are in a relationship. Like, you really want to have sex with this guy right now?
Very Tiernan-esque in that respect, like how small characters with small roles pop in Die Hard.
Well, I mean, he just clearly makes a choice to be like, let's have a conversation about that dynamics among this. It's not just, hey, get on the elevator and be scared. It's like, this guy, you know, is senior to this guy, so he makes the joke about the elevator, and he just goes, shut up. Like, they don't like each other. The woman who's
Patrick
wearing the
Fischler, probably the most famous guy on there.
Yeah, for sure. But you just feel like he took 10 minutes or 15 minutes to be like, this is the dynamic.
Yeah.
It's
great. It's one of my favorite shots in the movie is in that sequence, which is the shot when Howard Payne disappears behind the door. I think he's escaping to the parking lot, and it blows up, and Keanu is blown backwards in slow motion. Yeah. I'd never seen anything like that, and I remember seeing the trailer for this movie. I was on holiday with my parents. I think I would have been like 13, and it was in a bar in like some Spanish island with no sound. But just it was like a top 10 movies at the US box office, and I saw some of these images from Speed, and that was one, and they were just so like striking and revolutionary. And I remember just thinking like, what is this movie, and how do I see it as fast as humanly possible? That was one of the shots. I mean, the other thing I would just say about the action in this movie, every single sequence is a 5-star sequence.
Yeah,
they even cut a couple that they wrote and they prepped.
Wow.
Yeah.
Like what?
Well, the greatest one is this thing called the Baker sequence, which was they were going to have in the story, they were going to have a helicopter come in, and a cop was going to come in and land on top of the bus and try to get on to so they were going to have that happen. And the way it was going to go was he comes down, he just touches down on the bus, he looks up, and there's an overpass coming. And he's like, take me up. And he pulls him up. And just as they pull him up, he clears the overpass. Then a truck comes by carrying panes of glass.
Oh, my God.
And he plows through it and just gets shredded.
Oh, my God.
And they prepped it, and they were going to shoot it and everything. It wasn't just like in the script. I think I've seen storyboards of it. Like, they were going to do it, and they just, stunt coordinator Gary Himes makes the point, let's do 1 or 2 or 3 things perfect, instead of go that extra mile for a few more where you're just sort of watering it down.
Well, there you go. That's the philosophy of the entire film encapsulated in one nugget.
That's true.
In a sense. That's what it is. It's 3 perfect, like, extended action sequences, if you like, in a beautiful 3-act structure.
And it was called the Baker sequence because that was the name of the character who was going to be lowered down.
That's really interesting. Wow.
So the action's pretty good.
Pretty good.
Not too bad.
Okay.
It would almost be glib to be like, let's break them all down.
Yeah, exactly. The other piece, the final piece of the puzzle for our anatomy of an action movie is the humor in this film. This is a hilariously funny film, much like Die Hard, right? The humor is almost non-stop in this film. It's a huge part of the entertainment factor, yet it never becomes close to being an action comedy. The stakes are always deadly serious. What are your favorite moments of humor in this film? Because it's a real smorgasbord of it's a laugh riot for a film about like domestic terrorism.
A laugh riot raves Phil Gawthorne.
I'm going to say 2 words: Glenn Plummer.
Yeah.
Glenn Plummer's the Jaguar driver.
Oh, he's incredible.
You guys are getting a good preview of what's to come actually on this because I've got him coming up, and
Amazing.
That guy is fantastic. He's been in so much. He was in Colors. He was in
Strange Days,
Showgirls. Yeah. Paul Verhoeven.
3.
He's just a great actor, and he was really good in this movie called South Central.
I've seen South
was
Central,
supposed to be his sort of like awards breakout thing, and Warner Brothers kind of screwed the release on it, and he wanted to get away from those kinds of movies, and so he took this role in Speed. He's like, oh, whatever, I'll do this. And that dude is hilarious. I mean, to me, the funniest part of the movie is Joe Morton saying everybody's fucking fired is up there. But the way Glenn Plummer says, take the phone, kills me.
Yeah.
And there's a story.
Get on the bus.
You get on the bus. That whole bit kills me. And the take the phone thing was sort of not meant to be played that way. And we owe Jan for that because Glenn wasn't really coming down on where he wanted it. And Jan was just like, just tell him to take the fucking phone. Like, play the irony of the situation of what's going on. You just ripped his door off. You're just fed up. And so he's like, all right, I'll just read it that way. Take the phone. And it's the funniest part of the movie.
Oh, absolutely. That and the moment when he goes, there's a bomb on the... Fuck!
There's a bomb on the... Fuck!
Yeah. I mean, talk about making an impact.
Oh,
he's in
so
it for
good.
like probably maybe 3 minutes. Mm-hmm. And
it feels longer.
It feels like he's in it for 15 minutes.
He's in the movie for 20 minutes.
Yeah,
and I mean
so
that
good.
in the best way. Like,
he's
you get
brilliant.
to know him, you know who he is.
I love that.
And then he
really
shows
good.
up. By the way, only person in the world who had a good time on Speed 2. And we'll talk about that later.
Oh, cool.
But I always mix up the moment. You know, he writes the thing and holds it up, and then it flies up to the windshield, right? I always confuse that with the moment in Last Boy Scout.
Yes,
like,
it's very similar.
I'm drawing him a picture.
Yeah,
He's like, what? It looks like an apple with lines coming out of it. And he writes BOM.
Yeah.
That movie is up there for me.
Yeah,
we did.
You guys have done that one, right?
Like 3 hours. Yeah, we didn't. Yeah,
we
maybe
love it.
Phil's favorite thing that's ever
so
happened is that movie. Yeah, it's incredible.
Shall we put on our tuxedos?
Let's put on our tuxedos. I do want to just throw out Sandra Bullock's get his legs, grab his legs when she's talking about.
But also get your ass behind the yellow line as well.
Get your ass behind the yellow line.
And there's something crass
so
about
funny.
when he's down on his knees and he's like, no, it's clean, and she's like,
yeah,
huh?
it's weird.
It's funny,
a weird
but it's
moment.
crass.
It's very crass. Yeah.
He didn't mean it that way.
No,
That's
but
just situational humor.
You don't have to
This
defend
film, I
a
do have to
30-year-old
defend
movie.
it. I
It's
do
okay.
have to defend it. Let's just, I don't want to taint anything.
Just how it is so weird. Like the whole situation is just so weird. And this is a movie that
it's almost like an
finds a way to
absurdist comedy
emphasize
in a
it.
crazy way. You know?
Absolutely. Is
All
it
right.
award time?
It is.
All right,
So
let's put on our tuxedos.
we're going to put on our
Let's put on our SWAT
tuxedos.
team suits.
We're going to head to the Die Hard Oscars, aka the Action Movie Awards. So I'm going to read out the nominees that I identified, and you guys can vote or add an additional one.
All right.
So our first category is the John McClane Yippee-Ki-Yay Award for Best Line.
God, this could take 20 minutes.
These were the few that I selected. The nominees are Shoot the Hostage, Pop Quiz Hot Shot.
I think it's over.
I love Don't Get Dead. What a catchphrase.
That's a good one.
I love that.
That's a good one. He brings it back twice, doesn't he?
He does.
That's Morton.
Poor people are crazy, Jack. I'm eccentric. And the final button of I'm smarter than you. I'm smarter than you. Yeah. Well, I'm taller.
I'm taller. What about
Do you
Matt?
have a pick or from those, or an additional line to throw in that's your favorite line of this movie?
Of those, I would sort of stand up for I'm taller, just because a lot of people hate it because it's like a one-liner quip. But it's like when he finally drops the kind of killed this guy finally, and he says I'm taller, and it works. I would write in, do you know what a bomb is, Jack? Your life is empty because you stopped the bomb from becoming. That's like dude just stepped off the set of Apocalypse Now.
Oh yeah,
and delivered a line. That whole bit's good for me.
Yeah. So my pick was literally, do you know what a bomb that doesn't go off is,
bomb
Jack?
That doesn't
it's
go
a
off.
cheap gold watch. Like that's it for me.
Yeah.
Because this is not a movie that necessarily, like, you spend so much time in action or whatever that to get this distillation of Hopper's philosophy, which, like, in a way, as a human being, you can sort of relate. Like, I spent my whole life doing this, and all I got was a cheap gold watch. Like, it's powerful, right? And, like, it's powerful. And also, you mentioned earlier when he says, they think you're bullshit, and he says, they don't think that. It reminds me of the moment in The Dark Knight when someone says, like, to the Joker, you're crazy. And he goes, no, I'm not.
Yes.
Like the
Very
conviction of the villain having
when they have
conviction
thin skin,
makes sense.
I love when a villain has thin skin and gets pricked and they seem sort of invulnerable. It's very psychologically interesting.
Well, in the way that a villain can be right in ideas but wrong in how they manage those things.
Well, you do understand that character. That's a great choice, by the way. That's a
beautiful moment, because what he's saying is he's expressing how he feels useless now that he has no thumb and he's had to retire, and whatever his life was is done. And so he's saying, you know what a bomb is? It doesn't explode. It's a cheap gold watch. It's useless. It's nothing. It's a ticking clock.
So
that's all it is
for himself, right?
And
like,
so
that's great.
And I think that of your choices, though, Pop Quiz Hot Shot is like the most important.
Pop Quiz Hot Shot is great, but again, I would stand up for I'm taller. I laughed in the theater.
Also, just a very quick, Mac, we're boned.
We're boned.
It's such a surfer dude moment. It's great.
So our next award is the Hans Gruber Exceptional Thief Award for stealing the film. Many nominees.
I think,
I've got 5 here. Dennis Hopper as Howard Payne, Sandra Bullock as Annie, Joe Morton as Mac, Glenn Plummer as Maurice, a.k.a. Toon Man. I believe they named him in the sequel. He didn't have a name in this one. Is that right?
Did they name him in the sequel?
I think so.
I mean, I truly blocked it, and
When's the 50 episode speed to Cruise?
Well, it's actually like next 27 kilometers or knots per hour, so whatever. The final one is Jeff Daniels as Harry Temple. So those are the 5 that I picked.
It's Glenn Plummer, man.
Who would you vote for stealing the film?
Glenn Plummer.
I agree, but I have to give a shout out to Joe Morton because Joe Morton's like special. Like, it's like I feel like I grew up on him on action movies like this, An Executive Decision, and then you learn like he's this serious theater actor and like a performer. And
Are you
going to
talk to him,
the movie,
Chris, like at some point? Who? Joe Morton.
Oh, I've talked to Joe.
Yeah?
Yeah, he's in there. He's coming up. I have not been able to figure out where to introduce him. Margaret Medina, who plays Jeff's partner back at the and
yes.
Richard Lineback, who plays
Norwood.
Right. And he's also Helen Hunt's father in Twister that gets sucked up at the beginning.
He's so good.
He's so good.
He's in Natural Born Killers too, I think.
They're all coming. Yes, they're all coming up. I just haven't had a natural place to introduce them. I want to backtrack on the line thing for a minute, though.
We've got some Oscars controversy again.
Well, because there's someone ought to be mentioned in this stealing the film bit. He just got an Emmy nomination for Succession. How have we not talked about Alan Ruck?
My God.
I did have him on the humor section, but yeah, he's brilliant.
I already seen The Airport. Probably deserves to be in the line discussion because that's just perfection.
Oh, he's incredible.
Like, we're at the airport. So, I already seen The Airport. Such a thing you would say as a tourist that's like dealing with this thing.
Yeah, he is.
Anyway, what a legend
absolutely,
that guy is.
Absolutely
like
brilliant. I actually do have him in the next section. So I'm going to press you for your votes for stealing the film. You've said Glenn Plummer.
I'm going to go with Joe Morton just to throw some love to Joe Morton.
I think he's incredible, but like even in a movie that's not great, like The Astronaut's Wife, he is phenomenal in that movie. Joe Morton, he just money in the bank every time.
Yeah, he's a great actor.
You know who steals the movie is Richard Schiff as the subway driver at the end.
Yeah, that was funny. I went, wait a minute, that's Richard Schiff.
Yeah, that
he's
was
great.
wild.
That's blown away.
My choice is actually, despite all these incredible actors, my choice is Jeff Daniels as Harry Temple.
Yeah.
And I just want to say one thing about this. Have you considered the fact that Jeff Daniels is hungover throughout this entire day?
That's incredible.
Making this the worst day ever that culminates in his death?
Smart hangover thing, which is he goes a lot because men of a certain age, when they have too many drinks, have stuffy noses the next day. I can tell you, and it feels it's like he's been snoring all night, and he woke up with like a stuffy nose because he's just great.
So great.
How long do you think it is between the elevator sequence and them getting that award?
That's a great question.
I think it's like 6 weeks.
Okay.
That because he says a while back at one point. That's such a good question because it feels
How long
almost
did
like
it feels like
it's the next day
to plan
you got also
something so elaborate, right? It has to be a bit of league time.
Yeah.
There's that, and it's also like that, like just, I mean, this is so in the weeds, but this is what we do. It's like they have to, like, everything has to go okay. They have to organize a ceremony. There's the whole bureaucracy of something like this happens, and there are additional people getting awards for other things that are happening.
Yeah.
So you have to assume they're like, we schedule one of these every.
Harry would have had to have had surgery.
Yeah,
on
he's
this
flipping around on
wound.
that leg.
You know,
yeah, that's true. It's got to, but it's even longer than that. It's got to be a couple months. You know what I mean? But to the movie's credit, you're not thinking about that. You're also not thinking about like if you know, it really almost it's so elaborate that it doesn't stand up to that. It stands up to that kind of questioning, which is really incredible.
Totally.
All right, let's move on to the Dick Thornburg Award for Dick of the Movie. So, some controversial choices here. Like, would you nominate Ray, Daniel Villarreal, for pulling the gun on the bus? Or Ortiz, a.k.a. Gigantor, played by Carlos Carrasco, for grabbing Ray and causing Sam the driver to get shot?
There's such a great story behind why all that happened, by the way.
Tell it.
If you want to. Go for it.
Oh, gosh. It was a domino effect. Originally, the bus driver had a heart attack, and Hawthorne James said, I don't want to be Fred Sanford on the bus. Like, I don't want to be the one guy, everybody's heroic, and then I get a heart attack and you know, die. And so they was like, okay, well, how do we deal with this and incapacitate the driver? We'll have someone shoot him. Who's going to shoot him? Ray, Daniel, who was going to play Terry, which is the David Kriegel role, the guy with the kind of 94 haircut, he was given this other role as like kind of a gangbanger guy who's on the bus and thinks that he's there to be arrested. Right. And so, okay, we'll have him shoot him. And okay, well, he's not just going to shoot him. What do we do? Oh, we'll have Ortiz tackle him. So Carlos has always been bent out of shape. Carlos Carrasco has always been bent out of shape about that to this day. Because, again, all these guys read the version of the script that had their backstories in there. And then suddenly they come in for the read but the weekend before they're going to shoot it, and all their stuff's been cut out. And they're like, what?
Oh, wow.
Whole story about that coming up. But... And Carlos is like, sure, blame it on the Latinos,
right.
you know. So it's like it's a
That's
kind of domino
that is
effect from
unfortunate.
changing that. But yeah, go ahead.
Well, there's those two which have asterisks to them because it is sort of circumstantially
Well, it speaks
complex.
to how complicated it is. Yeah, and effective.
And then there's Alan Ruck as Doug Stevens, the doofy tourist. Beth Grant as Helen, the old lady on the bus who tries to get off.
Dick. My God,
it's hard to find. It's hard to. It was a little. I'm being harsh because there's not a lot of dicks in this movie. There are actually, and also even the police are
Payne's kind of a
Dennis. But what about the woman who dropped her handbag and ruined the looped video? Like she fucked up everything.
Yeah, Jesus. Very simple instructions.
Yeah.
I've actually always been irrationally mad at her about that because she's the reason Richard Schiff is dead.
Yeah.
I love it when Hopper goes, no! He loses it. It's incredible.
God, so
the stuff on the dicks of the movie.
You go first.
Okay.
I got to think some more.
Okay, well, what is a dick?
That's a separate part.
I'm going to go with the cop who encourages Helen to try to get off the bus.
Oh.
Because it's been made clear no one can get off the bus. They get it. And my wife actually pointed it out. She was like, why are these guys telling her to get off the bus? Yeah, they're the dicks in the movie. Yeah, that's
that changed too, by the way. She originally was... I'm sorry, I know too much about this movie.
We're clearly not interested, so please stop.
The Helen character originally was like kind of being brave and testing. Like, I'll go first. I'll try, and then that's when they find out that he had a bomb there to blow up. And so Jan was like, I need a coward to Beth Grant. And she's like, I was a hero before. Now I'm like, she hates her character now. She's like, I was so glad when she died. Dick of the movie is the drummer of Dogstar, Robert Mailhouse.
Right. Thanks for pushing that.
Thanks for pushing that. You can tell that guy's a fucking dick.
Yeah. That is an excellent choice.
It's the suit. It's the whole thing.
Oh my God, he's so smarmy.
So smarmy, but it feels so real.
Yeah.
Everyone knows that guy.
Yeah.
That's like he partied with Ellis back in the day, that guy.
Oh, that's a good pull.
Our final category, and I don't know if now we just real quick for the Die Hard on a Blank hardcore fans, my dad.
Yeah, you're going to say our parents?
We are considering tinkering with the best death category. So I wondered if, for old time's sake, Liam, if you felt comfortable doing the presentation, because this is usually presented by Marco.
Warm up. No more table! Next time you think of... Next time you have a chance to kill someone, don't hesitate.
So look out for some tweaks to this category. Sorry,
I stopped doing it when we got guests because they would look at me like, what's...
So the best death, we've got Beth trying to cross over, Harry's death. What an incredible piece of acting by Jeff Daniels that you break down in microcosmic detail down to his facial muscles.
He's incredible
in that scene. So what an amazing... That
great
haunts you,
that
doesn't
guy.
it? His expression haunts you.
Yeah.
Just an amazing piece of acting. The train driver, Richard Schiff, a.k.a. Toby Ziegler, getting brutally shot in the back, and Howard Payne losing his head.
Oh, man.
Best death, guys.
It's Harry.
Harry.
Yeah, I mean, it's Harry. That's it's a bold way to depict a character dying too. It's not a big moment. It's a quiet moment, and as I said in that episode that Jeff kind of clowned me on, but still, it's a noble death.
Yeah,
he knows he's done.
Yeah,
he knows it, and he just sits there and eats it, and it's good.
Does.
It's just like he got checkmated, and he realized it. It's really powerful. So I think that's a great choice.
Oh, yeah, I'm going to just...
Yeah,
100%.
we all agree on that.
Yep.
Unanimous. We love you, Jeff. All right, our final section of the show.
Presented by Marco. Oh, that's the character. Oh, okay. I was like, what is that? Okay, now I got it.
Yeah. You were like, why did he do that? That was weird.
Our final
it was pretty
section...
normal until then.
Our final section of the show is what we would usually call the Double Jeopardy quiz, but now we're going to call it the Pop Quiz, where I ask you guys 3 trivia questions. Now, this was difficult. This was difficult because I
think you might test
everything.
Well on this one, my bud.
Everyone! You know everything about speed. So I had to do sort of some speed-adjacent questions. Do you guys want to collaborate or compete?
Once again, you're asking me to compete with a guy that spent years.
I know what your answer's going to be.
He was like, let's collaborate. And I was like, good, because I'll lose. Your choice. Compete or collaborate.
So you're going to ask questions about speed?
I'm going to ask speed-adjacent questions.
Speed-adjacent.
Three trivia questions.
They're all Speed 2 cruise control related.
Yeah.
Who was the key grip on Speed 2 cruise control? You probably know, and you've interviewed him.
No, actually.
I weirdly have the Wikipedia open, so I'll check it.
We'll compete if you want.
That's fine.
Okay.
Let's
make it
do
fun.
All
right. Make it spicy.
I've got my ass kicked.
All right, guys, here we go. Question number 1. This should be relatively easy. Joe Morton appears in this film as Jack's boss, Mac, the leader of their LAPD SWAT team.
This voice.
But in which other 90s action movie is Joe Morton repeatedly shot by an LAPD SWAT team?
Who answers? Do we just buzz or what?
Sure, yeah.
It's Terminator 2.
Is the correct answer.
I had the image and I was like, wait, what movie is this? Well done.
The guys who shot him are the guys who trained him for Speed.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. Even has facts about the
he
trivia
knows
questions.
the key grip of Speed too.
All right, that was an easy.
I didn't get it. I totally forgot.
That was an easy one.
There.
Yeah, it's kind of creeps up on you.
Miles Bennett Dyson.
Yep, there you go.
The breathing.
Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh my God.
What an actor.
Good movie, by the way.
not too bad.
And also, the leader of that LAPD SWAT team is Dean Norris of Breaking Bad.
That's right.
In T2.
He's also
Right.
in Lethal Weapon too.
Yeah, that's right.
So this is an adjacent Lethal Weapon
So
podcast.
Lethal Weapon bingo again. Question number 2. Jeff Daniels plays Detective Harry Temple in Speed, one of his many nice guy roles around that time. But in which other 90s film does Jeff Daniels play a nasty, racist LAPD cop named Alvin Strayer?
I have no idea.
Now there is a clue available.
Yeah.
You can phone. You can call.
Unless
You
you
can
know.
phone a friend. You can call Al
Racist
Powell.
cop. What is this? I know this.
I feel like I've seen this movie.
They're screaming at us at home, probably. I'm going to need a phone a friend deal.
All right,
or
we're going to
whatever.
call Al.
Let's call Harry
All
this
right.
time.
All right. The clue is Eric Stoltz appeared as Daniel's LAPD
Oh,
partner.
2 Days in the Valley.
Yes.
I've never seen 2 Days,
2
in,
Days
the
in the
Valley.
Valley. Fuck,
It's
yeah,
I
knew that.
love
It came up
that movie.
on your show
Yeah,
recently,
yeah,
and
he
I was
talks
like,
about
I
it.
got to watch this.
He's got that great anecdote from Clint Eastwood that tells
Yes.
him, if you can do Dumb and Dumber and you can do 2 Days in the Valley, you can do this, because they were going to do Blood Work or
Yeah.
True Crime, one of those.
Yeah.
Absolute Power? Is it? No, it's Bloodwork. It's
Bloodwork, yeah.
All right. Our final section is
Wait.
convoluted corner.
Oh,
corner.
right,
All right.
I hate this quiz. I fucking hate it.
I hate quizzes, period, man.
We're dying here.
I'm going to do the Howard Payne laugh as he escapes.
Interactive podcasting.
All right, I'm going to ease off on the helium. Dennis Hopper previously starred in True Romance, where the two central characters fall in love at a triple bill of kung fu movies.
Oh, Jesus.
I got it.
The lead actor from that kung fu triple bill was one of the stars of the 1975 Japanese film The Bullet Train, which was one of the inspirations for Speed. Can you name this iconic Asian movie star?
Sonny Chiba.
Is the correct answer. Why? You didn't even need the clue.
I spent some time in the 90s obsessed with Quentin Tarantino. As we
That
all
was
did.
my
You
clue
know?
that
Did I
he,
jump on?
appeared in
I
Kill
wasn't
Bill.
sure. You
One.
know, speaking of which, Dennis Hopper's big scene in True Romance is sitting opposite.
Right. Christopher Walken. All roads lead back to Speed.
I haven't killed anyone since 1984. Why did I do that with a
I'm not
pasta?
sure if they could
I
do
liked
that
it.
scene today, by the way.
What'd you say?
I'm not sure if they could film that
Oh my
scene today.
God.
Oh, boy.
Yeah.
That's another topic. Moving on.
Good movie.
All right. Well, this has been amazing.
Oh.
I just wanted to summarize like my thoughts on this into sort of the wider picture of the show, which is although so Speed, although clearly influenced by Die Hard and these other films that we've talked about, Bullet Train, Runaway Train. I'd say this really is an original story paradigm that created a new strand in action movie genealogy that would then branch off and spawn its own imitators, right? Like name some of you know, if I'm missing any, but obviously the sequel, Money Train, Nick of Time,
Wait,
Chain
there's a
Reaction.
sequel to this?
Kind of. Yeah, we don't. It's like the cousin we don't talk about.
Right.
Ronin, Chill Factor, Gone in 60 Seconds, Collateral, Cellular, Unstoppable, Snowpiercer, Bullet Train, the more recent one, and Ambulance, as well as some notable Die Hard / Speed hybrids, such as Broken Arrow and Hard Rain, both of which were also written by Graham Yost. After the promise of Point Break, it would cement Keanu Reeves' status as a bona fide action star, which would lead to classic action movies such as the Matrix franchise, the John Wick series. And I think you can also draw a line. I'd love to get your thoughts on this, Chris. I think you can draw a direct line between this movie and the Fast and the Furious franchise.
Yeah.
Would you
Definitely.
Would you agree?
A lot of the guys that are drivers in Speed and stuff worked on those movies. Talking about Nick DeSimlian earlier, he mentioned one that I thought was an interesting one, Crank.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
And also there was the X-Files episode that Vince Gilligan did with Bryan Cranston. that was like kind of overtly inspired by Speed. But yeah, I mean, wait, what were you asking me?
Well, just
I think you nailed it.
Yeah, I mean, Speed, I think my point really is just that while Die Hard influenced this whole, DNA strand, this genealogical thread of all these other movies, I think Speed kind of took some of those elements and then branched off with its own thread. Some of them are Die Hard hybrids. Some of them are their own kind of imitators. So I think basically the point is to give Speed respect that it stands alongside, but also alone and apart from Die Hard as its own singular, unassailable masterpiece.
This is the reason I did the podcast, if you really want to boil it down, which is Speed deserves to be in the canon, and I don't feel that it is. It's sort of this like stepchild or something, if you will. And people, every time they can finally see Speed and they haven't seen it in 20 years, they're like, oh yeah, this movie rocks. Like it's undeniable, and yet it's not in the canon. And I think that's because it was made at the peak of a number of filmmaking techniques that were on their way out. So you can't say it's like influential in certain ways. But to your point, yes, there are strands that made it out, but people never follow those strands back to Speed. And I just think Die Hard, Terminator 2, it belongs right there. And the goal of 50 miles per hour is to get it there. So what's coming up next on 50 miles per hour?
I mean, we got the whole series laid out for us today.
Yeah, you got some good previews today. Like I say, last week we talked to Nick, and that was sort of a breather in between. We spent 15 episodes talking about development and casting and everything. Haven't even gotten to cameras rolling yet. So now we're going to get into the production episodes. There will be several episodes sort of talking to stunt drivers and stunt coordinators and just nuts and bolts stuff. I interviewed this guy, Gil Combs, him and Donna Evans, another stunt driver, anytime you see the bus moving in the movie, they're driving it. And usually it's Gil driving it from the top of the bus with a hydraulic system and a pod that they can move all over the bus. I mean, there's just the details of how they actually made this. And you're going to hear from special effects coordinator John Frazier and just really digging into, again, what I said at the beginning. This was the movie that got me into the filmmaking process. So you're going to hear more detail than you ever wanted. We're going to have a whole episode just about the jump sequence. There's another borderline Rosebud-like thing where I'm trying to track down an element of that as well. More stuff where I bring in guests, and I talked to Katie Walsh about greatest Los Angeles movies.
We love her. Yeah,
Katie's the best.
Because to me, Speed is a great Los Angeles movie. You had something on here. Could it take place in any other city? No, because to the point that Guillermo del Toro makes in that episode, it takes place in the city of Gridlock, where everybody knows that sooner or later your car has to stop. And so I talked to Katie about the greatest Los Angeles movies. I talked to the Light the Fuse Boys about the greatest action set pieces. So we're just going to have fun for the rest of this thing. I mean, I guess we're about a third of the way through now, more or less, coming up on halfway through. And it's all leading up to the 30th anniversary next June 10th, 2024.
Well, if you aren't already a listener of 50 Miles Per Hour podcast, I don't know what you're doing with your time, but let's get it together. It's a great show. It's like and we're so psyched you did this. We're so psyched that you came on and did this with us.
Of course. Thanks for having me, man.
Thank you.
It's great to come over here.
Anytime. Come back, please. Thank you, Kris. That was awesome.
That was great.
What a great guy. What a great interview.
What a coup for us to have the world's foremost expert on speed on the show.
So good. You know what else is good? Sometimes we read reviews of the show. I'd like to read a very specific review that we got.
From one of our bots.
Hello, I'm here to review
I love Phil.
podcasts.
This show is
Phil
great.
Phil is very handsome also. There's a podcast series called Die Hard on a Blank, and the Under Siege episode they did is fantastic. That review is from Andrew Davis, director of Under Siege and The Fugitive, and I would say a Hollywood legend of the highest order.
Yeah.
Listen to our podcast.
Yeah, you threw me for a loop there for a second, but yeah, we've discovered that like a couple of days ago.
Yeah.
And
in
our
an interview on
minds
Yahoo
exploded. We love Andrew. We legitimately love Andrew Davis. The package, Under Siege, obviously The Fugitive. We've talked about him at length, and it was really like kind of mind blowing to hear that. So thank you so much to him, and it just goes to show you never know who's listening, and a lot of that is thanks to you guys, like spreading the good word and
absolutely
letting people know.
We found out about it from a listener to the show, emailed and said, "Oh yeah, I read that interview where Andrew Davis gave props to your show." This was an email that came to me, and I was like, I don't know what you're talking about.
Wow.
And then I looked it up. So thank you so much, Allied O'Cloven was the email address for sending that our way.
We really
Thanks for
appreciate
emailing
it.
us.
Thank you.
Yeah, I don't know if you understand how much getting an email about how much people like the show means to us. It's like the greatest reward. That's really great. So please keep that up.
Yeah.
Phil,
yeah,
how's X treating you these days? How's your
it's
X
a nonstop.
account?
It's a nonstop fun fest. No, I'm on X at Philip Gawthorne. Hit me up, banter. I'm out there occasionally tweeting about movies, and I genuinely have enjoyed the community of other cinephiles that they've met on there. So by all means, hit me up, text me, tag me. I want to meet our listeners and interact with you guys, and we really appreciate it when you engage with us and the official accounts.
Yeah, and you can find me at Liam G. Billingham on Twitter, and at DieHardOAB is the official account for the show. We're on Twitter. We're on Instagram. And I refuse to say X in a real way, so we're still on Twitter. You can also email us at diehardoab@gmail.com. And you can email Phil at ilovehelicopters@helicopterlove.com.
I haven't had any emails yet, but, hope springs eternal.
The account would have to exist for you to do that. Next time on the show, Phil...
Yes.
What are we doing?
We're doing a movie called Blown Away.
It's Die Hard on a Boston.
On a Boston?
It's Die Hard in Boston.
It's Die Hard in Boston.
So I will be pulling out my fucking Boston accent.
Yeah.
I'm just going to drop right into it.
So, yeah.
A lot of Goodwill Hunting quotes on that episode.
Serious Boston energy coming at you for that one.
Big Boston. Big.
It's an interesting movie. It's an interesting companion piece to Speed. They're kind of similar, and we have a lot to say about it. So tune in for that one.
Thanks so much, everybody. We'll be back next time with some new FBI guys, I guess. Die Hard on a Blank is a podcast created and hosted by Philip Gawthorne. Liam Billingham co-hosts and produces the show. Mike Mayer and Michael Sugar are the executive producers. Find us on Twitter and Instagram at DieHardOAB. Rate, review, follow the show wherever you get your podcasts. Most importantly, tell your movie podcast-loving friends about Die Hard on a Blank. Special thanks to Suki Chu. See you next time on Die Hard on a Blank.
Back to school savings are officially in session at Tanger Outlets. Shop tax-free August 2nd through 6th and save up to 70% off the latest school styles. The best of apparel, footwear, accessories, and more. Save at Nike Factory Store, American Eagle, Gap Outlet, Crocs, Under Armour, Banana Republic Factory, and hundreds more. There's always something happening. Discover the latest fun and events all season long. Tanger Outlets, your savings destination.